Good morning. This is Melissa Libby, and you are listening to Mom Treading Water, or I should say watching. Sarah, good morning. You are my first guest. What? Crazy.
So exciting.
But yes, I'm very excited, friends, to introduce Sarah MacLaughlin, who wrote an amazing book, Raising Humans with Heart, not, I repeat, not a how-to manual. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Sarah, before we get started, what is one of the things, do you remember what I told you about me reading these books?
I do.
Do you want to share that? Have a good laugh.
Melissa told me that mine is the first parenting book she has ever read.
Yes.
And I'm so honored. Honestly, I'm so truly honored.
Oh, Sarah. Thank you for not being preachy. And
I try.
This is one of the, yeah, you're definitely not preachy, because this was one of the reasons I did not want to read a parenting book or read parenting books. I know I'm doing things wrong. You don't need to remind me all the things I'm doing wrong. And this doesn't. I actually think this is book, because I was looking over again before, obviously, this. Yeah. And I was like, there are so many good, whether you have children or not, I think there's so many good reminders like, hey, but we'll get into that. Like, it's okay to put yourself first. It's okay. You need to have gratitude. There's so many, like, kids or no kids, worth the super fast read. It's seriously.
Right. I did that part on purpose too, like short and sweet. We gotta, especially if you do have kids, your amount of time and attention span has, because it's just busy.
It's very, very true.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, why did you write this book? Open-ended question.
Right. Well, I wrote this book because over 10 years ago, I wrote another book called What Not to Say, Tools for Talking with Young Children. And you can probably tell from the title that I may have strayed even a little bit tiny into the preachy zone at that point.
No.
And so with another 11 years of parenting under my belt, I just really wanted to send out another missive to parents about all of the things that you were just saying, like building gratitude into your daily life, making sure that you're on the list of people whose needs need to get met, and that it's not just your other family members. And just really, I also started a new job where I learned the quote that sort of inspired this book, which is how you are is as important as what you do. And really just started thinking about, it is important what you say, your words have impact, but more important than what you say is how you say it and how you bring yourself to your relationship with your children. And that the idea that we want these relationships to be, loving and strong and long-term, and that there's a lot of like traditional parenting practices that are not relationship building, not connection building. And so instead of like wagging my finger at people, I just wanted to be like, hey, this is a thing that maybe you should consider, that the relationship should come first, and trying to figure out how to live life and all of the demands that life puts on parents without support in our country in particular, and how to reframe it so that we can all thrive a little bit more.
So if people had one takeaway from this book, like if you had to pinpoint one thing, did I just put the pressure on you or what?
Let me grab my copy. One thing. It's so hard.
I know that is hard.
I'm just glancing through. I think it would have to do with emotions and how our emotions affect our nervous systems, and how important it is to be aware of that when you are raising young children, because everybody feels emotions, right? But the way that we handle them, process them, metabolize them, and gain either competence, intelligence, whatever term works best for you, that impacts our nervous systems and how we relate to each other. And I just think that is so crucial. One of my chapters is called Emotional Competence is Not a Soft Skill, because a lot of times these emotional skills get put, in this bucket of like, it's not an important skill. But I really think that these kinds of, social and relationship skills and emotional skills are going to be what improves everyone's lives down the road. I think they're going to be vital for our kids and the jobs that they have. And I stand behind that. So I would say it's all about emotions.
Yeah. I you know what? That was a huge takeaway. I was telling you that our daughter, Mickey, she's 4. And let me tell you, that girl is a pistol. And I love that about her. I love that she is so outspoken, and I love that she speaks up for injustice. But sometimes that's challenging, right?
Yeah,
That's challenging.
yeah,
It, and I think you really speak to a great point about emotion that, like, my husband and I, we need to check ourselves because, you know what, especially this week, we've all been sick,
yeah. That's such a
and and you know what, you're tired, you're irritable, and she's still Mickey, and I don't want it any other way. But it's controlling, like, your own emotions, like, because I think you're teaching them. You can
yeah.
say,
Oh
you
yeah.
can speak until you're blue in the face, but
Right.
if you have different actions, those actions, I think completely
Yep. Yeah,
speak
being
more.
able to respond instead of react is, like a nice thing to be able to say, but to be able to actually pull it off, there is some work that has to be done. And at the beginning of my book, I talk about like the manual that we bring to parenting is how we were parented and how our emotional triggers and our emotional reactivity was basically programmed when we were little based on the interactions that we had with grown-ups. And that's something to unpack. And sometimes it's not very fun to unpack, but and it can be painful. But I feel like it is one of those things that actually can reset your triggers so that they're not so jumpy, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
so that you do get a little pause or a little breath or a little space in between something your child does and like what comes out of your mouth or how your body responds to that. And getting that little tiny gap of space is all you really need to be able to take a breath. And even if you just then say, one of my tricks is to like just say what you are initially wanting to do, and then you have space from it. Like, I really feel like yelling at you right now. Like, I've said that to my child. I want to threaten to never let you do XYZ again in this moment, because that's literally the only thing that's coming to my mind when I see you do that behavior. But then I'm creating space and I'm actually not doing that thing, but I'm still being honest about where I'm at, of like, I'm still working on not being so emotionally reactive. I've told my son, my mom and dad didn't make lots of space for my feelings when I was little. This is new information we have about the brain, that's good for children to have that space. And so I'm working on my side of things while I'm trying to help you wire your brain in the most productive way possible. But it's funky and tricky because I don't actually fully have the skills that I want to impart to my child. So there's like this double duty thing going on, and it's healing, right? It's healing for me to like metabolize those pieces from my upbringing, but it makes it a little bit cloudy sometimes when you're trying to then guide them. So externalizing your process of like where you are, even if it's like, I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths right now before I respond to this, ginormous mess I just walked in on, or whatever it is, so that I can keep my cool while we figure out a plan. Like,
There was a point with my kids that when I was like realizing that
yeah.
I would say, you know what, guys, it's okay to say to mom, you need to take 5 deep breaths. If they could feel like I was getting it, because sometimes like you're almost like lacking that emotional intelligence when you're like, oh my gosh, if you do that one more time, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that also makes them do it. Now, I'd love to tell you where I got this tip from. I'd love to tell you it's like this high end. I got it from Daniel Tiger. Daniel Tiger, take a deep breath and count to 4, or something like that. But it did. Yeah, exactly. And then I'm like, 1, 2, counting down.
Oh yeah. I mean, the tools, exactly what you're saying, like the tools that they need, we need them too. I used to learn, this is my preschool days, where I would hold up my hand and say, blow out the candles, and the goal was for them to take 5 deep breaths. And then as they would blow, I would take the candles down. And, my son, sometimes when I would do this to him, he would be like, he's not actually taking deep breaths. He just try to blow the candles out. And I would be like, no, you got to do 1 deep breath for each finger. And, I coach him through it. He was probably like 3 or 4. And then one time when he was honestly not that much older, I was having a moment and he was like, Mom, you need to blow out the candles. And I was like, you are correct. I actually do need to blow out the candles. And so I let him do it. It was like my coaching coming back to me, right? Like all of the not that it's his job to parent me, but he was like in the moment, just like, wow, you clearly need to like, lady. So it is, they are watching. I mean, the good news, it's one of my jokes is like, the good news is our kids are always watching us. And the bad news is our kids are always watching us.
Yes.
So they're learning from us how we handle when we're upset. And if we're telling them, well, it's so easy to tell your kids when you're not upset, like, here's how you should handle it when you're upset. But then if we aren't actually doing that, like if we aren't actually taking a deep breath when we get triggered, because we tend to feel justified in our emotions, like they're unreasonable, but my anger is totally justified, right?
Yep.
And then I have different rules, and that's not going to fit with them. They're not going to follow. They're going to do what we do, not what we say, like, unfortunately.
Yep. You know, and that is one of the things that I absolutely love about your book is that, I mean, you're clearly an expert, you're clearly well educated all around, but you say, and you talk about your imperfections. And that's so much what started my podcast is everything on social media. Everyone's like, look at us and we're perfect. You're like, heck
right.
no, you're not perfect. Who are you fooling? Come on. I'm like, I bet you have a zit. Okay. I know you have a zit, girl. I know you do.
Yeah.
But I love
Pinterest.
that. But I love that you talk about your own imperfections and how you learn them, and that you're human, right? We all screw up. We all have moments where we're all like, oh, that wasn't cool.
Right. Well, and there's I always forget where this might have come from Harvard Center for the Developing Child, but I'm not sure. But there's this idea that in every relationship there will be rupture and then repair. And it gives, it takes the load off of that, like the weight of the perfectionism of like, you have to get it right all the time, that you have to respond to your child and meet their every need. And they actually don't need that. They need us to be attuned to them, and they need us to, respond contingently. Like, I think the research says like 30% of the time, like you can't check out completely. That is true. But it's also not great for them if you're like, hovering over them, trying to meet their every need. It is important for our kids, I think, especially as they're growing older and gaining independence, for them to see that we are our own people and we're taking care of ourselves too. And that every time there is a rupture in a relationship, just like any adult to adult relationship, that there's also a rupture in, that it's important to know how to make the repair, how to make amends, how to check in and be like, that's totally not how I wanted to handle that. And I'm sorry. And I'm going to work on that. I mean, we have that language in our home where we'll say, I'm working on that. Like, that's the thing I'm working on. And because I'm working on things, I'm working on it. My child's working on not interrupting, but guess what? I'm also working on not interrupting. Like, there's lots of different things that we're all always kind of trying to get better at, and being clear about that and checking in when you mess it up.
And I think that speaks to so much long-term. Like, I think like, and this is not faulting anyone. We talked about this. You've talked about this in your book, how we were parented, how we were raised. Yeah. And I honestly could not tell you a time that my mother ever said, I'm sorry, I messed up, I made a mistake. And I don't fault her for that, because I think it was just that's what she did. Mm-hmm. And we apologize to our kids all the time. So that tells you how much I screw up, right? But we do. Again, you can say, you have to say, I'm sorry. But first of all, if you don't mean it genuinely, then don't bother, right? You need to learn that emotion and that feeling. And but I think if you don't say, yep, I need to work on this. I as a parent, I need to work on this. I made a mistake. I was wrong. Yeah. And go ahead, please.
Oh, it was making me think about, I think we talked about this before when you and I met, that, the model of authority that we are trying to embody and bring to our homes is really different than a model of authority that we probably grew up with. And like you said, it's not their fault that they didn't know about a different model of authority, right, or how to bring firmness and kindness, or I'm trained in Circle of Security, and one of their little mantras is that the parent needs to be bigger, wiser, stronger, and kind. And so, our parents just didn't have, there's so much information. We have sort of the opposite problem of our parents, where they didn't really have any information about parenting. We have like almost too much.
Yes.
That you haven't read. I've read all the parenting books, so you don't have to, which is fine, because you're like, I don't want to. Yeah. But I love them. I live for them, and I read them, and it's interesting. Like, a lot of the a lot of these parenting books and programs, like they're saying a lot of the same things, which is great because it hopefully will help parents figure out how to find that, the word that's the technical word is authoritative model of authority, right? So it's, you're connected, but you also have high expectations. You're firm about boundaries, but you're also, responsive and listening about the child's feelings about the boundaries. You're not changing the boundaries, but you're not being like, I'm done and walking away after you set the boundary, right? Like you're helping kind of coach them through the upset of the boundary. And so that looks really different than anything most of us received, 30, 40 years ago. So
no, I totally agree. Now, this week, I did an episode on gratitude, kind of based on our current week of this, that I was super grumpy because I very rarely get sick like this, and everyone was sick. And then I was like, whoa, like check yourself for a minute. A, it's not COVID, and B, it's not COVID. So let's celebrate that. But I was catching myself saying, why am I being such a negative Nelly? And I love that you talk about gratitude, like the importance of it. But I'm going to let you expand on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's I tell the story of how I had a friend who was doing this gratitude practice, and then I wasn't really practicing it, but then once I did, I started practicing it, and I had sort of an accountability group around it, and it really shifted my perspective because the glass is a half empty or half full. Like it's both. Like
it is.
It's a paradox, right? It's both half empty and it's half full. So how you choose to perceive it is important, right? And and also this cool information we have about the brain that in order to increase survival, like our survival instinct, our brains naturally have a negativity bias. We tend to see the worst in situations because it keeps us more vigilant, right? Which is great if you're trying to, live in the jungle or a cave or something, right? And you have to protect yourself all the time, but that's not our situation. Our brains still do that to us. So knowing that and knowing like, okay, my brain does that. So I'm going to try to like consciously counteract that through practicing gratitude. It was really revolutionary. And I love that you tell the story that you were like, it's when you're most grumpy that that's so great because I have gotten in that habit too. Like when I'm most grumpy, I'll like, try to write out 50 gratitudes or 100 like really just like powering through it because it's so easy if you're in a low place to just hang out there. And instead to bring gratitude of like, let me see if I can, get out from under this icky feeling or get through it. It is very transformative. I was honestly very shocked at how transformative it can be.
I'm glad I'm catching myself on that. Listen, again, Lord knows I have done a million things that are probably wrong, but I'm glad that I'm trying to be more aware of that and even talking to the kids about it. Because I think hopefully that is going to change obviously their mindset. But
totally.
I mean, again, you're the expert. I claim I'm the expert on being imperfect. I rock at that. I'm awesome at being imperfect. I really am. But I mean, but clearly you truly are an expert in this. But I think if we don't teach our children about more, I mean, it's okay. I think you have to acknowledge the things that aren't going right. You know what? That stinks that your nose is running because you feel like poop, and I hear you.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
But I think there's go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's that connection of, your mental health and your physical health. I truly, truly believe that. Again, not an expert. This is just Melissa Libby theory.
I agree with you.
I mean, do you find that with people as well, or when you're working with families? Sure. Because you're more than an author. Do you want to actually share the other services and the other things that you do as well? Because you have a huge list.
Do I?
I don't know. I'm impressed, man. I'm impressed. That's all I'm saying. I'm impressed.
Oh, you're sweet. Well, my background's in early childhood education. I actually was a toddler and preschool teacher for a long time, and then I was a nanny for some families for a number of years, and then I became a social worker. So I've worked with adoptive families, foster families. I recruited and trained and supported foster resource families for almost 7 years. Wow. And then for the last 5 years, I've been a writer and trainer for a nonprofit in DC called 0 to 3, where the focus is on really babies and toddlers, and trying to help like ensure that all babies and toddlers can thrive, essentially. So it's really my dream job. I got hired to write content for parents. So just celebrated 5 years in that position. And
wow, congratulations.
yeah, it's so fun. And I do a little writing on the side, and when I can't stop myself, I write books during pandemics. So
so
it forced me to, because I had no place to go and nothing else to do. So it worked out for me.
See, look at gratitude right there. Gratitude is sometimes not saying I am grateful for, it's just subconsciously acknowledging, yay for the pandemic, because now I was able to do this.
Yeah, it's true. It was wild timing, honestly.
See, look at you. You don't just write about it, you truly live it. And that was like my first impression with you. I'm like, she just doesn't write pretty words. She's not just a good writer. She truly believes it. And it's probably what makes you good at what you do.
Yeah, I really do. It's what gives me hope, honestly, because I can look around the world if I don't have my gratitude glasses on and be like, OMG, what is happening?
Yes.
And I do feel like we are, and this is from the time I was a little girl, and I talk about this in the book, how I just was like, but babies are born, like, how does a baby end up doing this, like, just wild, destructive stuff out in the world? Because some people do wildly destructive things out in the world. And I always believed that babies were born like pure and innocent, and not, they're just like fresh out of the oven. What could be wrong with a baby? And so I was like, oh, something must happen. And this is research shows this too, that, most people who end up doing these horrific things out in the world, that something really traumatic and terrible happened to them in their childhood. That is so very common, that that became my focus, to focus on if there's nurture and nature, and both, we know that it's not either or, and it's really both things that create a human's personhood. Then if we can't change nature, we can change nurture. We can try to get in there and figure out what is the most helpful way to interact with babies and toddlers when they're young and their brains are developing so fast. That's why my organization focuses on the first 3 years, is because in the first 3 years, there's like over 1 million neurons per second are wiring in a baby's brain. Like, it's just the most active time in a human's life is from 0 to 3. So helping parents understand that window of opportunity so that they can really, make the most of it by interacting and talking and reading and all of those things that really help brains grow. It's just, I've always been super interested in that.
That's great. So say, like, okay, we've talked about this. I mean, we're an adoption family. Both of our children are adopted. And we talked about this nature versus nurture. And
absolutely.
So, all right, my kids are past 3, and we're still dealing with some, because they're people, we all have our struggles.
Absolutely.
There's still time to change that behavior, or maybe like do a redo. I hate to say redo, but so what do you think are ways that, you're past that point? Like,
oh yeah. And it's not like the window closes. Like, I didn't mean that by any
no,
stretch.
no.
Yeah. Because it is the most active, but it doesn't mean that brains are not still busy developing and wiring and growing forever. And they even have very interesting and cool research that shows, that saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's not true. Actually, our brains have what's called neuroplasticity. And even as adults, we can learn new skills. We can learn new ways of being. We can heal old patterns. It's absolutely true that at any time you can change your brain's structures, even through the wiring. So that said, I think that it is the thing. One of my favorite quotes is from Byron Katie, is, if when I argue with reality, I lose 100% of the time. So my first piece of advice would be to, like, start where you are. Like, if you're, whatever's going on with your child, no matter how old they are, like, meeting them where they are first and foremost, and validating their experience before you try to figure out what to do next is really paramount. And then it just really depends on what the thing is, right? And trying to support whatever skill building there might need to be. I mean, it really depends on what the thing is, right?
Right.
Like, so, but I would say the first step would be to like acknowledge where you are and then move on, and then connect, and then move on from there.
Well, and again, your book is great and it's a great read, but I know for myself, it's been, let me go back and read that part again. Let me look and see. So I really, I'm going to include a link.
Okay, super.
So on my Facebook group, as well as in the show notes, Amazon, correct?
It's Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Oh,
And you
yay.
actually,
Okay.
if you're local, I know you and I are both local in Maine, you can
Yeah.
get it at Print Bookstore, which is on Congress Street in Portland.
Okay.
I know we're about to get a new bookstore in Wyndham, but they're not open yet. So
Oh, that's exciting.
I can keep you posted about
Yay.
where else, but I know it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and I think you can order it from IndieBound also.
Okay, great. I'm definitely going to include that. Let me say it again, not a how-to manual, because I don't need someone else tell me the million things I'm doing wrong. I know I'm doing stuff wrong. Come on, I know it.
And you also know
But
you're doing stuff right too.
you know what? True.
Yeah.
And I have to, again, my daughter, she's just, I want to be cool like her. I want to be confident like her. But again, that's challenging. So, but I'm like, okay, we're at least doing something right that she is, speaking up against and things that she finds unjust or whatever it may be.
I love that you have that perspective, because I think it's really important that we do learn things from our kids, just like they learn things from us. And that is a really vital perspective to have, because we can get very like parent centric and egocentric, that we like, we know all the things and it's a very top down situation. And I think that interesting and cool things happen when we turn that into a two-way street, where you might learn from me and I might learn from you. And that is interesting and cool.
It is. It absolutely is. I agree.
Yeah.
Sarah, is there anything else before we wrap up you would love to share with folks? Or
It's just a pleasure. And I really appreciate you having me on as your first guest. And
yay!
my book being your first parenting book, I'm so truly honored.
So many first. We're gonna have like an anniversary party next year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it.
It was so great meeting you. Sarah and I had lunch before we did this, and it was so much fun. She's truly a genuine person. Clearly this book comes from so much truth and really it's so genuine, not just lip service. You really, I adore you. I adore you. I adore you.
Please stay in touch. Don't be a stranger.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I love that.
And we will.
Thank you to all your listeners.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Thank you. And hopefully we can have you back on again at some point.
I would love to. Absolutely.
Yay. Again, you're just an expert in so many things, or you have so much experience in so many things. So always opportunities to learn. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much. It was so good talking to you.
You too. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I stopped. Was that good? Was that okay?
That was great. I thought it was super great. I think you're still recording, but that's okay.
Am I? Oh, I think it says. Is yours saying recording? It is?
You might have to cut this part off at the end. You turned your camera off, but go over to the recording button.
This is funny.